All right, everyone, welcome to another edition of The Hub. Our guests today are the president and head of the Guam Economic Development Administrator, that's what I was searching for, Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority, Melanie Mendiola. Thanks for joining us.
Happy day, Nestor. Thank you for having me.
And, of course, one of our regular guests, the chairman of the Republican Party of Guam, Mr. Juan Benitez. Thanks for joining us, JC. All right, so before we get into the pocketbook economic issues that we were going to talk about today, I wanted to ask about the great debate because the UOG came out today with a statement or a news release that is official cancellation of the great debate, which we have every gubernatorial year. The Camacho Ada campaign also came out with a statement. Juan Carlos, can you talk about that?
Yes, I did a statement. I was there as a representative of the party, where we got invited to the meeting where normally we would go through what are going to be the rules, the procedure that will happen for the great debate. And it was heartbreaking, to see the young kids come out and said that the decision had been made to cancel the great debate. After 28 years as the main and most of the time only debate in Guam, it was sad to see that end this election year. I think the release from the Camacho Ada campaign is sort of hoping that there might be a solution where the Lou and Josh campaign would reconsider and do allow an opportunity for the students to presence and continue to participate. Through the years, there has been one debate that has been consistent, has been the great debate. This year, there was a proliferation of debates. We ended up having 8 debates. I think that they were official, and then the different Rotary clubs they want to all do debates, and the different campaigns chose which debates they wanted to attend or not. But then a decision was made by the Lou and Josh campaign that they would not attend any more debates unless the Camacho Ada campaign would go back in time and redo the debates they didn't do. But it's sad to see. I don't think that you should be dictating what debates your opponent takes or doesn't take. That's up to the decision of the opponent. But we hope, and I truly hope for the students and for the people of Guam that they get an opportunity to see their gubernatorial candidates articulating and debating their points of view in front of each other, so they can make a choice of who should be or continue to be the governor of Guam.
Now, Mel, you're not involved directly in the political campaign, but you are a very prominent cabinet member of the current administration. I know that there's been a lot of finger pointing between the camps about who's to blame for not the debates not materializing. You got a comment on that?
Well, I think that the Lou and Josh camp have been pretty consistent about the reason behind not participating in the debates, including the great debate. Of course, it's a disappointment to anyone who's put in hard work, whether it's the students of the University of Guam or any organization, the students of the Chamorro Association or any other organization that invites candidates to show up. And I think Dr. McNinch had an interesting backup plan, and the decision not to move forward, I think, was a reflection of a number of items. But I think the debate climate is also changing. I've started watching some of the debates going on in the United States. It looks like in the mainland, it looks like debates are getting a little bit more, they're getting smaller. Sometimes it's just the reporter and the 2 candidates. And I think the great debate was more of like a sporting event. And, in all sporting events, one team doesn't always get to choose where they'd like to play. If the Yankees only played at the Yankee Stadium, then maybe we'd have different outcomes than we do. But you got to go out and got to push beyond your comfort level. Being governor, you got to go and talk to people that don't necessarily want to talk to you. And so I think sometimes, we make decisions. I'm not really party to the decisions made behind the debates, but I respect Lou and Josh Camp's decision to remain consistent.
Yeah, but I really think the other debates are debates for particular groups of entity: the Chamber of Commerce, the Women's Chamber of Commerce, the Realtors, Guam Realtors Association, the Hotel and Restaurant Association. They have their own thing, but the great debate was great because the questions were made by the students about the issues that impacted and affected them. And it was a level playing field. I don't think there's ever been a candidate that has complained and said, I didn't feel that it was a fair opportunity or showing that was given to us at the great debate. I think it's sad that this has happened and the decision is. And again, we're hopeful that there might be a way that we find a middle ground where we can at least have one debate.
Well, since you mentioned that, and Mel mentioned the trend towards more intimate debate between just the two principals and maybe a reporter, we're working on something along those lines. Hopefully it comes true, and if it does, we will have a lot more details in the days ahead. Okay, but let's move on to what we brought you on here for was the pocketbook issues. And the first one is, and something that the Chamber of Commerce has been very adamant about, is the rollback of the business privilege tax. And two things that they point to is the fact that just this past fiscal year, the Budget Bureau came out with the final year-end CRER, the Consolidated Revenue and Expenditure Report, which showed revenues in excess of projections of over $100 million. That's one. And then just, I think it was the past fiscal year in which the EITC is now going to be paid out of the federal pocketbook instead of the local pocketbook. So that's about, I guess, up to 70 million that we're also saving from the general fund revenues. So with that in mind, Mel, should Gov Guam return some of that money back to the business community in the form of a rollback of the BPT?
In the form of a rollback of the BPT. I think that's a very interesting question. I've certainly been part of I've certainly been part as a member of the chamber, as a member of the Guam Young Professionals, as a member of the Republican Party of the rollback crowd. And it wasn't until I got a little bit more informed about what's going on in our government financials that I started to really understand and kind of form a position on how I feel about the rollback of BPT. To me, the rollback, a unilateral rollback, is really easy to talk about, right? 5% to 4%. We keep it simple, nice and easy, and it impacts the businesses. What I don't agree with is saying that the 5% to 4% is meant to help the people of Guam and the rising cost of things. 5% to 4%. Right now, 80 to 90% of our local businesses already pay less than 5% under the expanded Dave Santos exemption, which I think everyone, including the Guam Chamber and all the 4% crowd, was in favor of when we expanded that exemption. But to roll back from 5 to 4, what you're really talking about are targeting a lot of our military contractors. I don't see any reason why they can't pay the full fare. You're talking about bigger businesses. And as far as translating that to the register, I could certainly see that in inelastic products with a lot of competition, such as fuel. I could also see it with health insurance. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the Governor Leon Guerrero lifted the moratorium on health insurance, was so that we could have targeted BPT abatement that really is truly passed on for the benefit of the people of Guam. Most of the outperformance that happened above projection in the financials has to do with individual tax filings. If the windfall, quote unquote, came from BPT, well, I mean, even if we kind of go back to the budgeting period of fiscal 2022, on one side of the aisle, they were saying, you're overprojecting, Gov Guam, you're overprojecting, the administration's overprojecting, so they pulled it back. So the outperformance is not unexpected, because it was a very conservative level of revenue that was adopted. Having said that, the outperformance, the above projected performance, has happened because of individual filings, not because of, I think BPT is like 10%, 11% above projection. That to me is hardly a windfall. And so if that being the case, we're not quite there. And I think the governor is very open to targeted abatement and targeted rebates. I think the new federal tax things that are coming down that Daphne Shimizu was talking about this morning on the radio, that's going to affect
IRS
income.
Adjustments.
Yes, that's going to affect our individual. It's going to affect our corporate. And that's the part that's projecting as over. So we could be coming up on a situation similar to the Trump tax cuts in 2018, which by and large were a good thing because they cut the corporate taxes, but they left us in this situation where we have a shortfall in our revenue, hence the increasing of the BPT. You know, I think the last time they did this, the last time the BPT was rolled back, it was like went from 6% down to 4%. I don't really see any studies shown, or I don't know if anecdotally we can even ask, like, hey, did the price go down when we rolled back to 4%? Did you pay less for Spam? Did you pay less for cigarettes? I don't recall. So.
Well, your response, Juan Carlos, and to the fact that, as the legislature will always say, they have in effect rolled back for 80% of the businesses the BPT, business privilege tax.
Okay, so I'll go by parts. So. And Melanie, it's good to see you. Actually, we get along very well.
That's good. That's great.
I'll go by parts. First, let's go back in history, 6%. Felix Camacho lowered back to 4% after 6 months. It was a needed increase at the time for shortfall. It was addressed and eliminated. When we did the raise to 5%, we, the people of Guam, were told, this is temporary. Businesses take it for a while. We're gonna do it because the Trump tax cuts, and then as soon as we get our books in order and we can maintain our numbers, we're gonna eliminate it. We didn't keep our word. That's a reality. Instead, what did we do? We got accustomed to getting the extra revenues and using it into other programs and continue to spend it. Year after year, for the last 2 years, we have an increase. What is the amount that lowering to 4% is estimated around $60 million. We have increase of $100 million in taxes. We have $70 million extra coming of the EITC. Why can we not keep our word and give this back to the companies? On the 90%.
So you think federal contractors should pay 4%? People that do work in the fence, and Juan Carlos and I really get it. We do get along. He's absolutely correct about that. Yeah. So we're just having fun up here, right? But so you really think that federal contractors who are flying in their people to work on our island should be paying 4%?
That contractor that's flying in the people to Canada and our island is not reporting the taxes in our island. So let's talk about the businesses that are reporting their taxes here and are filing here. Separate issue that we need to talk about the base and how they're doing. Some of these companies that are coming in are doing that work. But black construction deserves it? Absolutely, they deserve it. Do I think that the hotels deserve it? Absolutely, the hotel deserves it. The supermarket deserve it. The stores. We keep talking about 90% of the businesses. I'm a small business. You know how many employees I have? 1. You know the big businesses, and we large majority? The Hilton, the Sheraton, the Hyatt, the Westin, the Duset, the Subaki. Are any of them paying 3%? No, they're all paying 5%. You look at the supermarkets. Get me any chain of supermarkets here, American Groceries, any of them. They're all paying the 5%. When you look at this, we need to figure out how we're going to address our companies. Our companies are barely struggling. They're barely made it through this COVID time. We're now going to have to deal with the fact that this Biden administration has strengthened the dollar to a point where tourists are not really going to come in the numbers we wanted until at least 2 years from now, when the exchange rate is more reasonable. When you're at 59 pesos, in the Philippines, people are not going to be coming here. They're going to want to go to the Philippines. When the Japanese yen is at 145, we go there. They don't come here. So let's sort of be realistic. If we gave our word to do this, we should keep our word. It is time to bring relief, not only to 90% of the business, which I still want to see the actual statistic that show that it is 90% of the business, but to the largest employers in this island that employ the majority of the workers that we have here. Because tell you what, Melanie, find me an employer that tells you that they're still hiring the same amount of employees they had before COVID. They're surviving, they're trying to rehire. No one's hiring the same amount of workers that they had before COVID.
Okay, we got to take a real quick break, and we'll be back with more of our discussion right after this.
Stay on top of breaking news and the biggest stories of the day with NBC News Daily. Get in-depth reporting from across the country and around the world, tips to take care of your health and your wallet, and up-to-the-minute local news. NBC News Daily, weekdays on NBC.
All right, we are back, and we're going to change topics now to the minimum wage. Should there be an increase to keep up with the inflation? We have the price of goods and services skyrocketing. Do wages need to keep up?
I think at this point in time, a minimum wage floor is not necessarily the priority in discussion about wages, because right now what we have going on is we have a competitive market for employees. You have a lot of openings, and I think what we're instead seeing, what I think is a prevailing kind of an impending structural problem that we have is there's a good thing going. You have unemployment dropping. We're at 4.8%, which is pre-employment levels. Having said that, what you see is the migration of a lot of employees from, say, the tourism sector over to the construction sector, which is higher paying. You've also seen Governor Leandro put out some boot camps for medical coding, medical billing, CNAs, caregivers, healthcare professions, which are also, healthcare tends to be a little bit more, it tends to pay a little bit more than tourism, for example. And so what I think the impending challenge really isn't what the minimum wage is, or how the direction of that in the next 6 months to a year. It's really the structural adjustment that needs to be made to still offer an affordable product to our visitors coming here, but offer an affordable product and deliver the same service with the right people, highly skilled, gracious people in the hospitality industry. So that to me is a little bit more concerning than minimum wage. I tend to think minimum wage is something that should be pegged to the CPI, or something that should be pegged. You know, the federal government, they look at their employees every year and they assess what's the cost of living, and then they give out a COLA or something along those lines. So in my mind, I think a minimum wage discipline needs to be what we work towards, not just this fundamental fight, because the economist in me is going to say, no, let the market determine what the wage is. That's exactly what's going on now, and that's exactly what's leading to a lot of these structural challenges, right? But I think what it is picking a disciplined approach such that our employers are not surprised, like, oh, by the way, by tomorrow you're going to have to meet the federal minimum wage requirement, right? And go from $7 to $15. I would never want to see that with our local businesses. And at that point in time, I believe the government would have to step in anyway to give businesses some aid to help with that. So
I want to dig deeper into the unemployment stats in a minute, but I know you probably will have some agreement with Juan Carlos on the minimum wage issue.
Yeah, well, you know, around 100,000 jobs on island, out of that, 6,000 only of them are earning minimum wage. So when you're talking about the issue of minimum wage, it's something that the legislature is going to have to focus on and address. It needs to go through our Guam legislature. That's where we need people like Mana Silva and Ken Long Guerrero, Vince Borja, you know, Michelle Hope Titan. So the people that have experience in the area of business in prior administrations and can really crunch and look at those numbers. But I agree with you. It's not the priority. It's not the problem right now. The problem right now is the inflation and how much money you actually are ending up in your house to pay for your groceries and your fuel to be able to come to work and take your children to school. And how do we address that and make sure that you end up with more money in your pocket? If you just look at it on its own and start just saying, okay, we're going to increase the minimum wage, then the employers will have to increase the cost of the assets or the goods that those employees are producing, or cut the number of employers. So it's a technical, complicated aspect and issues, but bottom line, barely any employee in Guam is earning minimum wage right now. It shouldn't be the issue that we're focusing on.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you completely. I think inflation is kind of but is there anything we can do about it right now? What can we do? Are we kind of a slave to what happens on the U.S. mainland?
Well, during I think the last time inflation was this high, the Fed monetary policy lifted the interest rates to double digits, right? And people were getting, 11% mortgages. Reagan administration, Republican. And they did that because they wanted, the reason for that was to stifle inflation at the time. And right now the Fed is saying, or a lot of analysts are saying, that the Fed is going to keep raising interest rates through probably the end of 23, and then start dropping to 24 to normal levels, what we perceive to be normal levels. So if we think a 4.5% mortgage is normal, then maybe 2024. So what that really means, I think, is that inflation, what we're dealing with is something that's we're dealing with from now until probably at the end of 2023. And any fiscal policy directed at that, fiscal and monetary policy directed at that. There's obviously some federal movement towards it. There can be local movement as well.
But is there any local strategies that can kind of address inflation?
There are, and they need to be implemented. And part of that is in conjunction with the federal government. So let's start looking at the impact of inflation, not just in the entire United States, but really focusing on Guam, which is where we live and where we're suffering, right? Next month, actually this month, next month starting in a couple of days, the Feds are meeting. They're going to raise the interest rate 1 point. They've already sort of let everybody know, expect a point. They're meeting then in February. They're going to raise a minimum of 0.5 point depending on how things are moving on the economy. Every time that you raise the interest rate, you strengthen the U.S. dollar. It's sort of like it's a opposite sides of a pendulum. That only country in the world that's strengthening their currency right now is the United States. So no matter which currency you want to look at, you want to pick the Philippine peso, the Korean yen, or the Japanese yen, or the Korean yuan, you're going to end up noticing that we are probably around 24% more expensive than we used to be. So locally, that is going to have an impact on our tourism attraction, because people will wait. They don't want to come in the same as us. If we don't go to Japan when the yen's at 101, right? We wait till it to be at least at 115. So how can we address some of these concerns, right, and these issues? You need to start working with the federal government and try to get local exceptions, because you have a disparate impact on this island of national policies and effects. And what can we try to do? We need to figure out how we can get some of our goods here on their shipping. We need to figure a way to lower shipping costs into Guam. Fuels, there's not a lot we can do. That's not Jones Act. But goods that are coming from the mainland, a lot of our groceries come from the mainland United States, California. 1/3 of the cost of that shipping cost is fuel for them. So if we can get some form of subsidies, temporarily 1 year, 2 years, a Jones Act exception, limited, maybe 2 ships, one for Matson, one for APL, so they don't keep fighting with each other. That's the type of thing that will try to bring a little bit more balance into the economy. The other one is, how can we attract tourism carriers to lower the cost of that airplane flight? Because right now, that jet fuel is even more expensive, the increase than regular fuel. So if we are able to get a temporary cabotage exception, let's say from one airport to another, Haneda to Guam, then that would allow you to have planes come here, drop tourists here, and continue up to the mainland United States. That would then decrease the cost of that airplane ticket in and out of Guam. But we need to be imaginative. We need to find ways around what's going on. In the 1970s, the hotels ended up getting a subsidy from the government, and they would provide a lower exchange rate for people that stay in their hotels, right? So if you stay at the Duset, then you can exchange at a lower rate. That's a short-term effort. That's something also like Gov Guam could look at, to working with the Hotel and Restaurant Association. But we need to figure a way that we try to reignite this economy.
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to have to be very, very creative in the next. We need to take another quick break, but we'll be back in just a moment. As the Decision 2022 race shapes up, keep it with KUAM News for all the news you need to know as you head to the polls. From weekly candidate profile analysis on the Hub on KUAM News Hotspot to our online candidate directory on KUAM.com, special features on KUAM Digital and KUAM News Primetime, plus live coverage of forums and debates. We're your one-stop source on every platform. Stay informed with KUAM News, your news leader, the voice of the Marianas. All right, we're back for our final segment, and I want to delve deeper into the unemployment statistics. That came out a couple of days ago. Mel, you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. I think what we're seeing, what I'm happy to see is the return of women into the workforce. You saw the exodus of a lot of our adult women from the workforce, but overall, unemployment numbers are 4.8%. I think the last time they averaged this was just prior to the pandemic. There's been quite a bit of movement, of course, to jobs into construction, those sectors as well. One part that's actually kind of close to my heart at GEDA is that GEDA was asked to work with public health to do some childcare assistance type of programs. So around the time of the pandemic, it's been throughout the years, the number's gone up and down, and maybe sampling error, who knows, but the number peaked at, 2,000, 1,000, between, in the thousands. The number of people not looking for work because of not being able to find childcare. And the number peaked at like 1,000, and the last number was 160. And so that gives me some good indication that some of our programs, such as the child care program, is something that's helping people get back to work.
Yeah, on that note, and to put it more in these numbers into more context, Juan Carlos, there are a substantial amount of people who are not looking for work, which kind of skews that unemployment number, doesn't it?
Yes, and I'll go by a couple parts. So many businesses close through this pandemic and close their door permanently. When was the last time you saw in Micronesia Mall, Agania Shopping Center, and GPO, so many empty slots and premium business locations that are empty? So none of them are doing jobs. Forever 21 and give you another example. It's so when you look at those numbers, that number is not counting anymore, right? Then you have a number of people that have left island to find better jobs outside of the island. We all have family members that have left, multiple family members that have left to find greener pasture in other areas. I still tell them they'll come back at the end because the weather and the people here are nicer. But if we really had such a low unemployment number, why are there so many panhandlers in every single corner, every village that you go to in this area? What we have created under the Lou and Josh administration is a concern to me, which is a large number of people that believe the government is going to give me the money. So I don't need to work. They're not looking for jobs. They're hoping that these programs will continue. It's an issue to me because I know most of these programs are going to start ending in September of next year. So how do we end up moving from there is a challenge, and I don't envy Melanie's job because she needs to try to figure out how to ignite and continue to get this economy to go back up to where it used to be.
Yeah. Do you have a response?
Well, I was going to say, a lot of our leaders felt that when pandemic unemployment assistance ended last year, that we were going to fall off a fiscal cliff, and that didn't happen. Panhandlers on the streets, there's anecdotal data out there, but there's also the homeless count, which shows that there's fewer homeless on the street. The businesses closed. For every business that's closed, there's businesses that are open. DRT reported like 36% more business licenses issued in 2021. And people go off island. That's what happens. You get you get a good job, or you get something different. You want to try something new. I have a very good friend who went off island because he just wanted to try something new. He's a single guy. I went off island for school and came back because I wanted to be with my family, and mom is home, right? Yeah. Our labor levels have remained fairly consistent, and the people that are hanging out, staying home, getting federal handouts. I mean, first, the people that are not looking for work, a lot of them are retirees. A lot of them are people going to school, people with childcare issues, right? Fewer of them now, thank God, and other reasons, caring for sick relatives. And so I think that there is a concern, certainly, that anecdotal concern of, oh gosh, if we just keep on with these facilitating these federal programs, it doesn't get the sense of urgency going for people to go out and find jobs. But we do see, the entrepreneurial spirit really coming out with people. So maybe they're staying home and being creative and coming up with something new so they could, compete against one of your businesses, Juan Carlos.
Yeah. So I'll start with the homeless number because I do care about this issue. I am a member of Catholic Social Services, and the homeless number formula was changed. So we no longer count people living in a car as homeless. We no longer count an individual living in a tent if the land belongs to them. So that's not a homeless. We no longer count as a homeless a person that doesn't have power or any utilities. So when you look at the number, of course the number came down. We also have we have around 115 under temporary housing due to COVID, which is about to expire. And as well as we know about the I forgot the other NGO that's working with us on caring of the homeless. We're both looking at this problem and saying, we have more homeless than we've ever have. We need to address it. And to try to say, well, the homeless number, according to the new formula from the feds, is lower, doesn't face the reality. We have more homeless than we've had before. So that breaks my heart because Ginger Cruz accused me of paying people to stay homeless, and that's shameful. No one should be forced to be homeless, and we should at least aspire to get everybody a place to live that's decent. So that issue put aside about the homeless, we do need to address the bigger picture and try to work together. Look, this election is going to be in January. I'm very hopeful and expect, and things are looking really good, that we're going to have a new governor and we're going to have Melanie will be part of the transition team, and we look forward to working with her and try to figure out how we get those programs to continue to work with the new administration.
All right, we're going to take one more break, and we'll be back to wrap up the show right after this.
Off today, I'm Serena from Docs City College.
And I'm Kristen from Docs Daycare and Preschool.
And we are so honored to be caring for the children of Guam. The governor's child care programs help businesses like ours to really focus on the kids. These programs also help nonprofits and after-school programs and grandparents and so many families.
Visit www.guamchildcare.com to learn more about the governor's child care programs. This ad is paid for with funds administered by DPHSS.
Be angry.
All right, we're out of time, but Juan Carlos, you brought something there for us.
Yes. This is our first time debating each other, and I'm a fan because farm to table.
Yes.
I'm a beekeeper, and I do that as my home is one of my ways of keep my sanity going. And I brought a little bit of honey from my beehives to give to both of you, which helps our farmers here to pollinate the crops and make sure that we have one of the best honeys in the world. And I think this is potentially going to be the first real export Guam has in modern times. There are only 2 places in the world where there is no viruses or diseases on bees. It's New Zealand and Guam. And I think this is amazing and it's wonderful, and I want to give it as a gift to you.
Thank you. Thank
Nestor,
you.
because you're here, you
All
also
right,
get one
thank
too.
you. Yeah, and you're talking to the right person. Okay, now, as president of GEDA, here's one way to kind of diversify our economy.
You know,
right?
interestingly, I'm so glad that you mentioned it. The governor just declared November Entrepreneurship Month, and one of the things we did was GEDA put out a program called the Growth Accelerator Program, where we gave some seed money to entrepreneurs, and one of them was Denancy, run by Pika and Lenny Ferherin, and they do a Denancy infused local honey. And so Juan Carlos is right. Our honey in Guam is outstanding. And honey also is one thing to combat climate change. And so, Juan Carlos, I think you're a climate change guy, from what I can tell.
Oh, I'm absolutely an environmentalist.
All right. Hey, thanks, Juan Carlos. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. We'll be back again next week with more of The Hub. Thanks for joining us.